Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and the latest Diablo 4 quarterly update is live, and it's all about sound. We also, I believe here, are going to be getting the reveal of the new Diablo 4 game director. So we're just going to dive right in, read, react, and analyze this. Now this was posted October 7th. This technically is the update for Q3, which ended at the end of September, but we did get a notice that things were being delayed. That could have been just to make a bit more room after the release of Diablo 2 Resurrected to not have too much happening at the same time. But let's dive in here. Hello and welcome once again to a new Diablo 4 quarterly update. I'm Joe Shelley from the D4 team. As a design lead who has been working on this dark, shared, open world ARPG from the beginning, I'm honored to continue the vision of D4 as its new game director. There we go. And I'm humbled to represent the team pouring their hearts into this game. So, Joe Shelley, Blizzard veteran, I believe in interviews, he was saying how he played Diablo 1 back in the day, huge into Diablo 2. He played while he was at college. And yeah, I think he said that he would spend every evening playing Diablo 2, and it's Diablo 2 that was a main motivating factor for him even applying for a job at Blizzard. He joined Blizzard in either 2006 or 2007, working on the WoW team as a game designer, and then on Reaper of Souls as a system designer. So he wasn't there for Diablo 3 at the beginning, but he moved into Diablo 3 when, honestly, if you haven't played the Reaper of Souls expansion, it really fixed a lot of the vanilla Diablo 3 issues. Last we heard, he was the lead game designer for Diablo 4, so seems pretty natural that he's now stepping into this position. For anyone who's unaware, we covered this in a previous video, but the former Diablo 4 game director, Luis Barriga, was presumably let go. He's left Blizzard, him along with Jesse McCree, two figures within the Diablo team, were let go amidst the ongoing scandal. Typically when a game director leaves a game before it releases, it's not a good sign of the game's development, but in this case, if it was that he was let go, or if it was for matters unrelated to the game and more related to controversy, then that's not necessarily indicative of anything bad about the game, or suggestive at all of any kind of troubled development. So let's keep going now. Like many of you, our team has been reflecting upon recent events. Whoa, are they going to actually address it? A lot has happened since our last blog, and the hard work of practicing the values we aspire to must continue. In parallel with that important work, development of D4 continues too. You know what, that actually is also maybe a reason why they delayed things. It's kind of hard to make a blog post update amidst a scandal. Over the past few years, we've assembled a strong team with incredible passion for D4. You, Diablo's fans, are a critical part of this team. With the help of your valuable feedback, we've steadily refined and deepened the game experience. We have ways to go, and while much has changed, our commitment to the game is unwavering. Sanctuary should always be items glittering in dark dungeons, tales of powerful heroes standing against the onslaught of hell, lands where trials, treasure, and terrible monsters lie around every corner, equal parts familiar and boundless in its possibilities. Doing this world justice is a solemn responsibility. Today we're taking a deep dive into the sound design of D4. Sound is a sometimes underappreciated yet integral element of the game's design. Tell me about it. Serving as a channel for communicating everything from incoming damage to confirmation that a button press was registered by the game to the intensity of a combat sequence. Honestly, like, play a game on mute and it feels less responsive. It feels less visceral. It feels... It's crazy how much the feel of a game's combat is impacted by sound and animation. Try turning off the sound in a Diablo game sometime. There you go. You'll find your eyes have to work a lot harder to follow the action. Oh, don't worry, we've all turned off the sound right before Bale dies, and all his drops come out in order to reduce any possible lag so that we can be first to click on those items. Control M, Control S, turn off music, turn off sound. Sound also conveys the subtext of the world through which you adventure. It supports the rising and falling action of the campaign and immerses you into the ambient life of a region, transporting you into the game world. While you're reading through the blog, I encourage you to listen to the ambient tracks and pay attention to their effect on your heart rate and emotions. Try closing your eyes while listening to get a better sense of how much is being communicated. That's bold. That is bold. Different people have different reactions to this stuff. Some people are very connect it with music and sound, and they can really experience visceral emotions from it. Others aren't so much, so we'll see what happens here. Crafting Diablo's sound requires science, art, and the occasional ball of fire. Sound supervisor Chris Jampa and his team have fascinating insights to share in this behind-the-scenes look at how it all works. We hope you enjoy this update and look forward to your thoughts and reactions. As promised, our next blog will cover endgame systems and visual effects. Bam. I know lots of people, all they want is game mechanics. Next update. Juicy endgame stuff. I'm very much looking forward to this. I want to know what am I going to be doing every day in D4? When I get to the endgame, what is my day-to-day in D4 going to look like? So I'm very much looking forward to this. It's been a while since we looked at systems, and there's a lot we're excited to share. Let us know what topics you'd like to hear about in the future, too. As always, folks, they're open to feedback. We're grateful to have you on this journey. Thank you for playing the stuff we make. Joe Shelley, Game Director D4. I think that's the first time you got to sign his name as Game Director. Well deserved. Alright, the sound design of D4. Hello Traveler, I'm Chris Jampa, Sound Supervisor for D4. The sound team has been steadily cranking away on the soundscape for a while now, and while we aren't ready to go in depth about the music side of D4 quite yet, okay, we wanted to start to give you some insight into some of the audio processes, content, and motivations behind the sound for the game. Before we begin, we wanted to give you something to listen to while you are reading this quarterly update blog. Please enjoy the snowy, dark, and stormy ambience of Fractured Peaks as you start on your journey. Well, that calls for earbuds. Let's go. Fractured Peaks. That's one of the regions in the world. So think snowy mountains. It's also the Vampire Lands, right? Well, I call it Vampire Land. It's Victorian Gothic horror inspired, is I guess the official words. Alright, we'll let that play as we keep reading. Sound and music in games are the invisible glue that supports the storytelling and ties you to your character and their actions during gameplay. Creating sound for games is an exciting artistic endeavor that you can't see, only hear. However, you can feel it literally with the sound waves against your body depending on what you are listening back on. Okay. Alright. It's an amazing medium that can also affect how you feel emotionally while playing a game. A lot of the time it's subtle, and other times it's over the top, but always there to support the moment-to-moment gameplay. We hope you enjoy this dive into various aspects of the game's soundscape, and you'll have plenty more to look forward to and experience when you finally get to play it. Naturally, we want anyone and everyone who might be hearing impaired to enjoy the experience of D4 as well, so we are taking measures to broaden the experience to be inclusive for people with hearing or visual disabilities. There are various accessibility features underway that we hope to talk about more in the future. Okay. I don't know what that entails. I'm ignorant to this subject matter, but I wonder what they could do. I once had this product, I believe it was called the Ouija, that it's a vibration machine. Not like that. It's meant to be a sound device, and so while you're listening to stuff, it basically emits just pure bass, and you strap it to your chest, so you feel that kicking bass vibration right in your chest. I don't know why that tech didn't really catch on. I guess people don't want to be wearing stuff to listen to music or play games, but it definitely adds an extra layer of something to the experience of be watching a movie or playing a game, right? If you feel that big bass thump and you can actually feel it physically in your chest. I thought it was a neat gimmick. Alright, the devil is in the details. For the D4 soundscape, we've continued the tradition of gratifying combat, expanded upon the ambience to support the epic open world, continued to embrace the darkness in tone and gore, while also trying to deliver a cleaner yet punchy audio mix that's adapting to the situations as you play. One of the biggest goals we try to focus on as sound designers is to make the highest quality sounds to be triggered back in the game real time and make them seem believable, as well as grounded within the game world, tied to what you are experiencing. The randomness of audio playback is of the utmost importance when it comes to gameplay. If you think about real life, nothing's ever heard the exact same way twice, due to your listening environment and the positioning of a sound source. Sounds never play back at the exact same sound pressure level, along with the reflections within your environment and everything else happening around you at that moment in time. In essence, there are always subtle, real-life reasons as to why nothing ever sounds exactly the same. So as sound designers for video games, we always strive to introduce subtle, randomized variation to not only the sound design itself, but also for when you hear it in the game. Case in point, what we're hearing right now It's a 50-minute YouTube video, but I mean, that could probably play for 10 hours and you would never figure out where it's looping. There's certainly looping of some kind happening in the various layers of sound, right? You have the crackling of the fire, you have the whistling of the wind, the creaking of the, the sconce or the thing on a chain waving in the wind. And so they set these randomized timers to all these things so that you can never figure out where it loops, because there is no real loop. There's loops to the individual elements, but not to the entirety of the thing. When we are doing our job correctly, it's something you tend to not notice, and supports your immersion into the game world by backing up the incredible visual, story, and end-to-end experience. Another huge goal we have when creating audio for D4 is to fill in sounds for just about everything that's occurring on your screen. Whether it's the world ambience, monsters idling off screen, the tiny chunks of wood that are colliding off a wall when you break an object, everything should make a sound. We pour countless hours of effort into covering almost everything you see and don't see, while also keeping it subtle enough to not be distracting and just feel right. The devil certainly lurks within the details. I feel there's so many things we take for granted that go into making a AAA game that maybe, not to say anything bad about indie games, but like, you know, an indie game might not necessarily go to all the lengths of all these little tiny details, but, you know, AAAs are held to a certain standard that if they're lacking these things, it's almost very apparent, but they're not things that we really think about, and how much work needs to go into making them. However, just because we are filling in as much sound as we can, it doesn't mean you need to hear it every time. The playback engine within the game will not trigger too many instances of a sound if they are trying to play at the same time based on strict settings we create as basic rules. Because of the isometric camera view and being able to see so much on screen at once, we must limit how many instances of each sound will play back at any given moment. Once dialed in correctly, you tend not to notice that some instances were never triggered, and that helps with the clarity of the audio mix. It's a fine line we straddle during big moments with a lot going on screen. You also run into potential performance issues if you have way too many sounds triggering at the same time. At least that's the case in D3. One trick for any D3 players, if you're having performance issues, try lowering your sound channels. That tends to work for a lot of people. How about we get on to more of the creative side of sound design? Naturally, there is no Diablo game without the heroes who do your bidding to vanquish the various evils that lie in your path. Let's talk about some of the fire-based sorcerer skills that partly define the class. Fireballs, okay. Hero fire skills. The sound crew luckily gets to record all kinds of neat and unique sounds for the game, so we've hired a pyromaniac to ensure we can capture all the best fire sounds. Alright, so that we have plenty of sound source to edit from when it comes time to start sound designing. Sound design is technically described as taking a recorded audio source, editing it, and processing it to be used in another medium. In the case of sound design for games, we'll record raw audio, reprocess them, and edit it for our gameplay needs in various ways to achieve something that sounds clean, usable, and replayable for gameplay. The sound could be exactly what it was originally meant for, or end up sounding completely different and used for something else entirely. You hear stories about, you know, I recorded one thing, but that doesn't sound like that through a microphone, but it actually sounds like this other thing, like, you know, maybe a running water or something sounds like a fireplace. I don't know, I'm giving a random example. But I'm sure there's stories like that. On the visual effects side of things, for instance, a lot of fire that you see in movies is digitally enhanced or completely CG because we're accustomed to fire looking a certain way. Then if you film real fire, it actually looks fake. Real fire looks fake because we're accustomed to Hollywood fire. Or like when you see an explosion, you're expecting a lot of fire, but real explosions don't have a lot of fire, and it makes it look fake. So they have to add fake stuff to make it seem more real to us. But I digress. Something we always tend to need for a game like Diablo is, of course, fire. When time permits, we plan for some time to record sounds out in the field. For D4, one of the first big recordings we did as a team was a desert fire session before the lockdown. We traveled far from Blizzard HQ to record various types of fire sounds in the deserts of California, armed with multiple recording rigs and microphones. Thankfully, since it was wintertime, it wasn't too hot during the day and just a bit cold at night. While our main goal was to capture fire, we ended up capturing all kinds of other sounds we have used during production, like ambience, rock, impacts, foliage movements, wood impacts, door slams, wooden cabin creaks, metal impacts, and scrapes. Sorcerer skills, Firebolt and Inferno. Some of the fire recordings were then used specifically for the Sorcerer skills Firebolt and Inferno. For the skill Firebolt, we recorded sets of wispy and smoldering flame whooshes using a fire staff, what is that? Or a dried out medium-sized log of wood, and performed the sound in various ways around sets of microphones. Once we had a nice assortment of different types of fire sounds, we then edited and processed those fire whooshes into game-ready one-shot audio files for the casting and impact sounds. To clarify, one-shot as opposed to looping. As well as longer loops for the projectile traveling through the air. It all comes together as one cohesive sounding experience once you get it hooked up in the game to play back as the entire skill sound effect set for Firebolt. Right, because you're going to have, okay, the one-shots, which will be the impact, the initial casting, and then after the initial casting it goes into the looping traveling sound, because you don't know how long it's going to be traveling, right? If it hits something right away, the sound is cut short, but it could potentially be going on and on and on to the end of the screen, so you create a looping sound and then finish it off with a one-shot. For the Inferno Sorcerer skill, we then used other takes of the fire recordings and processed them to sound more aggressive and powerful for the larger skill. Just like Firebolt, there's a set of casting one-shot sounds, a set of loops, and another set of one-shots for when the snake form constricts its body. Say what now? Did they mean Hydra? One cool thing about the Inferno skill is that while it's fire that has taken the form of a snake. Okay. Because of this form, we are able to take some liberties on pushing it away from just fire sound design. We added some light snake rattling sound effects paired with a darker toned, ethereal end to the skill sound to make it feel a bit more magical. When all these pieces re-trigger in game, it will always sound like the same skill, but be slightly different each time, which increases the replayability sound-wise. Alright, and here we actually have a video of that recording session. Alright, let's quickly look through this.
Slate this. Big flame.
This is Poi Ball of Death.
Poi Ball of Death, okay. That's crazy that makes that sound. I guess it might.
Big 4-1-4-5.
Oh, that's
with
the fire staff.
All 4 wicks are on fire. It's a big one. It's a big one.
That's cool. Oh, and here we go. Now we get to see it in game. We're gonna get to see that Inferno, I bet. So that's just, like I said, what was a Firebolt? I want to see that fire snake they're talking about. Whoa, that is a big fire snake. That is enormous. That is, wow. That is a snake. I'll be linking to the blog post in the description if you want to watch the full video yourself. Let's move on now to monster sound design. Diablo games wouldn't be as fun if you didn't have monsters to slay. There wouldn't be a game! One of the most fun things about working on a Diablo game is the vast amount of variance. The vast amount and variance of monsters that exist. This makes monsters ripe for both experimental and more traditional sound design, so let's dig into some monsters sound design for Foley and voice. I think Foley means the sound effects, like footsteps, movement sounds. Monster movements. The combination of expert animation and AI brings life and personality to the creatures as they undertake their nefarious activities. When we start the audio process for a brand new monster, I always recommend that the sound designers start by adding footsteps and Foley, clothing or skin, to their movement animations. The moment the creature has footsteps and Foley, the creature's cadence and rhythm of their movement really comes to life. It's at this point I consider that they are becoming grounded and attached to the world. This also dictates how vocal they might sound based on their patterns of movement. Monster voice. The next layer that finishes... Oh, speaking of, so like Foley, I've heard about Foley artists for movies, for instance. So much of what you hear in movies is not actually being recorded on the spot, but being added in as Foley later. Like someone's walking and you hear their footsteps, they're not recording their footsteps. There's some dude in a sound booth taking shoes with wooden blocks to them and going clop, 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 clop in front of a microphone and timing it to the action. And they do this with so much. And it's because you can't record clean audio in a giant exterior environment with tons of noise. You have to isolate the sounds. But anyway, monster voice. The next layer that finishes the birthing of the creature into existence is their voice exertions. These are the grunting or yelling sounds of them exerting at the player as they attack, or the screams of pain as you take them out one by one. Each monster family can be quite different from the next, so depending on the type of monster, we might have intense sound design layers of animalistic type sounds, or even everyday objects that we will manipulate to sound like a screech or scream to create a layer within the final voice. Other times it could be simpler, as we'll hire creature voice actors to help create the core tone of the monster's voice that we can then build around with other sounds. In the case of the Wood Wraith, it's almost fully sound designed from wood creaks and strains processed to extreme lengths and choosing the right sounds to convey emotion. The Wood Wraith was a blast to sound design, as it's mostly freaky and creaky wood sounds, with a touch of very low-pitched human tone underneath it all. Let's hear it. Yeah. So this is a new monster. I don't think we've seen this before. Look at that. Cool. Almost looks like it's wearing a hood with... The way the branches come out looks a bit like horns, makes it look more ominous. Another monster we had the pleasure of working on is the disgustingly awesome Fly Host. Wait, is that what I think it is? This beast walks around, birthing flies to attack the player. No, it's another gross monster. Oh man, we ended up using some of our early gore session recordings where we ripped and smacked cabbages and melons and stirred and squished mayonnaise, salsa, and a delicious 7-layer dip into a not-so-great smelling slurry to make some great slimy and disgusting sounds to use in our sound design. Oh boy, what are we in for here? It's the cabbages. Making those... oh man. Squelching. Always a nice word. Oh, those grapes. Oh. This is such a fun job. This is such a fun job. Oh, okay, new monster. That's the fly hook. Ah, it looks like some Silent Hill monstrosity. That is horrific. Open world ambiance. One of the audio pillars for D4 is living audio. What this means is that the soundscape is ever evolving and never static. This pillar is built deep into the sound design variations we create for all types of sounds, including when it plays back real time in the game, especially the ambience. Because of the importance of the massive open world, we wanted to give the ambience as much detail as possible and think of it on the same level as hero sound design. Having the audio and the systems changing subtly over time is key to this pillar. We always want the subtle changes in ambience, that might not be very noticeable, less repeatable, and feel more natural and immersive overall. The world-building team has done an amazing job giving us huge amounts of inspiration and filling out the regions visually so that we can follow it up with immersive ambient audio. Since the player might be in the open world for a large amount of time, we wanted to support each exterior region with unique sounding environments that also include subtle changes to the audio mix over time. To help achieve this, we used audio systems like real-time occlusion, I'm not sure what that means, high-quality reverbs, and environment reactive delay/echoes. I believe occlude means to block, so real-time occlusion, I guess if you move in front of something or something moves in the way, it'll block or mute or dampen audio. We've provided some long-form recordings of in-game footage with a static shot where you can hear the ambience changing over time. Not only does this show some cool ambient sound design, but we also wanted to provide these to you for your tabletop RPG sessions, or even just to sit back and get lost in while working. The clips were recorded around 5 to 6 minutes and looped to be almost an hour. Guys, you could use this for your D&D sessions. I've been really focusing on adding audio to my D&D sessions. It used to be in the form just of music, but now it's also been in the form of just ambience. You know, in D&D you have very little visuals to work with, but audio is something that you can really introduce to help bring in immersion. or at least to help shape emotions. Dry steps. Gonna skip ahead a bit here. Hear a bit of the nature. I feel like the air has a dry feel to it. All right, next, Skosglen. This is the Druid lands. I'm expecting a wetter sound. More damp, rainy. Scotland, right? You know, old Celtic lands. Okay, we even have a coast. So yeah, we have the waves. The seagulls. Right, so we had bird sounds in both, but you can tell there's a distinct difference in the kind of bird. This bird already is more reminiscent of the harbor. Skosglen Rain. Okay, that was Skosglen Coast. Well, it was in the if I had paid attention to the words that I was reading, I would have known what to expect. So, Skosglen Rain. Again, there's always nature sounds, but it's different nature sounds, different kinds of animals. Alright, dungeon ambience. When it comes to the Diablo dungeon crawling style ambience, how do you pronounce that word in English? En français on dit ambiance, but I feel weird when I say ambiance. Is it ambience? Did you guys say it in English? Anyway, we take a special delight in creating various and unique sounding experiences to heighten your immersion. Our approach to the dungeon ambiences is a bit less intense compared to the new open world, as we don't want to distract you away from a key part of what makes a Diablo game fun: dungeon crawling. This is one area where we can take more liberties in diving deeply into the hellish and creepy soundscapes while having the monsters on screen to accompany the audible experience. For Diablo 4, we are taking a more realistic approach to what you hear is what you get when within a dungeon. With long reverberation and sound occlusion, we want you to pay close attention to what might be just around the corner, mentally preparing you for the next pack of enemies. Breakable interactives. Scattered around the dungeons are a plethora of gratifyingly great breakables. The interactives team have been creating hundreds of amazingly detailed breakable objects in D4. For the amazing amount of detail they put into objects as they break, we in turn wanted to fill in every sliver and chunk of destruction you see with believable physics audio. Destroying objects in Diablo should sound just as gratifying and believable as taking down monsters. We put a lot of effort into making sure that all objects have an extremely gratifying break sound, while supporting the debris with tiny bits of audio to accompany the pieces that break apart and fly across the room. I'm still amazed at the level of detail we have for the breakables in D4. One of my favorite things to do when I see a room full of them is to have at them. Alright, let's see some destruction. Yep, every one of those little logs had its own thing. Oh, some gold fell out of that. The urn. Alright, game mix. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about the isometric camera. How is the camera going to play into sound design? I guess your distance to an audio source, if you're overhead, audio would sound different than if you're in the thick of things, and they probably want you to feel more like you're in the thick of things. It provides some interesting challenges when it comes to bringing all the elements of the game mixed together. Because you can see a battlefield at a certain angle out to a certain range, we have to make sure that the monsters existing on the screen are covered with audio, but have the overall mix not feel too cluttered nor too empty. There's a lot of real-time juggling of sound playback based on priorities and importance to you, the player. For D4, we are able to drive the real-time audio mix more than ever before. Because of the isometric camera view, we must trigger sounds on just about everything you see, but focus your ears on the most important sounds you should be paying attention to. We've been carving away at audio mix states and an audio importance system that will allow certain important monster sounds to poke out when they are needed. Clarity of game audio mix is hard to achieve in a game where you can have multiple heroes as well as various amounts of monsters on screen, while having detailed ambiances means we need to craft different audible mix states depending on the situation. We hope you have enjoyed this brief look into the sound design of D4. There's so much more to talk about, but alas, we will have to save it for another time. We welcome any feedback you might have about anything you have heard in the videos or learned about in this quarter's blog. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about the soundscape of D4. Chris Jampa, Sound Supervisor. So that was cool. That was interesting. We learned some stuff. I know there's questions about music, right? This doesn't touch upon music, but that doesn't mean there won't be music. They mentioned music as a topic for another time. But yeah, I think this just goes to further reinforce that when it comes to all of the dressing, I guess, of D4, everything is looking like, you know, no concerns in that regard, anything regarding, you know, visuals, audio, the tone, all that stuff. I think most people's questions, and probably why a lot of people are particularly eager to hear about game systems, is because those are more of the big question marks where there's room for concern of like, oh, you know, is it going to be one way or is it going to be the other way? Whereas with pretty much everything else, there's just a lot of confidence from everything that we're seeing. But as expected, by end of December, that's when we should be getting our next quarterly update. If you didn't see the last quarterly update, the one that was in June, you can check that one out over here, because that's going to wrap up this video. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. Check out these other videos and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo content.